Hi and welcome. Welcome everyone. As our audience fills in to this Alta Live event, let me get a little bit of housekeeping out of the way. If you are here for a discussion on protecting butterflies, bees, and other invertebrates, you are absolutely in the right place. And I'm excited for you. We've been talking about this subject at Alta and as we practiced for this event, and it's incredibly interesting. So as you file in today, welcome to Alta Live. This is the digital interview series we do here at Alta Journal. My name is Beth Spotswood. I'm Alta's digital editor. And today I am so excited to welcome Sarina Jepsen. Based in Portland, Sarina is the director of the Endangered Species Program at the Xerces Society, a science-based, we love science-based, nonprofit dedicated to the conservation of invertebrates. She was featured as a trailblazer in the current issue of Alta, as written by Jessica Klein. Jessica will moderate today's conversation, and I will stick around to attempt to facilitate a really cool slideshow. So the three of us are kind of going to try and make some magic happen for you today. Quickly, if you're unfamiliar with Alta Journal, we are an award-winning quarterly magazine and website focused on California and the West. In fact, each issue has a trailblazer like the fabulous Sarina Jepsen, as written by Jessica Klein. If you like what we do here today, I so hope you will check us out. You will attend more Alta Live events. You will learn about our California book club. And consider subscribing to our magazine. I will toss a link in the comments. We absolutely want to see your questions, so please use the Q&A button or the chat. I'm tuning in from Novato, California, so please get the chat started by letting us know where you're watching from today, and maybe you'll find out what butterflies and bees you can look for while you're there. With that, I'm going to get lost and start prepping our slideshow and toss it over to Jessica.
Thank you so much, Beth, and hi, everyone. It's good to be here with Sarina. So I guess first, Sarina, to start, could you tell us a little bit how you first got interested in invertebrates back when you were, I believe, a teenager?
Oh, sure. Yes. First of all, thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I became interested in invertebrates when I was a teenager, and I discovered a feral honeybee hive in my parents' shed. And so got really interested through learning about honeybees, and then that led me to learn more about wild bees and pollinators more generally. And then eventually I went on to UC Davis to get a graduate degree in entomology.
And today you are the Endangered Species Director at the Xerces Society. I said that right? Xerces?
That's correct.
And first, what does that name mean? And then after that, could you tell us a little bit what your job entails?
Sure, yes. The Xerces Society is named after the now extinct Xerces blue butterfly, which is the first butterfly that is known to have gone extinct due to human activity. It used to live along the Presidio in Northern California, and as the Presidio was developed, it went extinct. And so Robert Michael Pyle, who is a lepidopterist and an author, founded the Xerces Society in the 1970s as just a group of lepidopterists, of butterfly scientists who wanted to prevent other butterflies from going extinct as the Xerces blue had gone. And so we grew from the early 1970s as a scientific society dedicated to protecting butterflies to have a much broader mission in protecting a wide variety of invertebrates, from other types of insects, bees, beetles, including fireflies, to snails, freshwater mussels, a wide variety of invertebrate species. So as the director of the Endangered Species Program, I work as a team of 10 conservation biologists, and we're dedicated to understanding and protecting endangered invertebrates and their habitats. We conduct applied research. We work with community scientists who volunteer to fill information gaps needed to further invertebrate conservation. We develop technical guidance to inform habitat management and protection of invertebrates. We educate land managers, community scientists, and the public in invertebrate conservation. We do habitat restoration for endangered species, and then we engage in advocacy and policy efforts to protect and recover vulnerable invertebrate species.
And before we move into the slideshow, what makes invertebrate species so important to their ecosystems or environments?
Yeah, invertebrates can play some really important roles in maintaining functional ecosystems, from our pollinators, who pollinate 85% of the world's flowering plants, and that's primarily animal pollinated, but primarily insects, to pest control. Many invertebrates are really important food sources for birds and other wildlife. They also play roles in dung burial, for example, among other services, water filtration and purification.
All right, well then, I guess, Beth, we can turn this over to the slideshow if you're ready. So Sarina, we're probably all familiar with this. This is a monarch butterfly. And I was wondering if you could sort of tell us what's happening with the Western monarch butterfly right now, and why we should be concerned about its drastic population decline since the 1980s.
Sure, yeah. So monarchs occur across the United States into southern Canada, as well as central Mexico. And the entire population is in trouble. But the monarch butterflies of the Western US have undergone a particularly dramatic decline. We estimate that there were between 4 and 10 million monarchs in the 1980s that overwintered along the California coast. And more recently, this last winter, there were only 2,000 monarchs in this migratory Western population. And so the Western monarch population has undergone a decline of 99.9% since the 1980s. So the Xerces Society and our Endangered Species Program runs a volunteer effort called the Western Monarch Thanksgiving Count, in which we work with volunteers to track the status of the Western monarch population. And this map that is on the slideshow just shows where the populations spend each season. So our eastern population primarily spends the winter in the mountains of central Mexico, overwintering in forested groves there, and then spends the spring and summer breeding throughout the eastern US. Whereas in the West, our Western monarchs primarily overwinter on the California coast, although some also go to Mexico, and then primarily breed throughout throughout California, as well as interior Western states in the spring and summer in their breeding season. So when we count monarchs through the Western Monarch Thanksgiving Count along the California coast, we're really capturing a census of the entire Western population. And then this is a slide of the Western Monarch Milkweed Mapper, which is another crowdsourcing project that we have to understand and identify important areas where monarch butterflies breed in the West. So we ask the public to submit photographs, observations of monarch caterpillars, chrysalises, even eggs, as well as adults, and observations of milkweed to this online platform. And then this information is used to help guide conservation, protection, and recovery strategies for monarchs by a wide variety of audiences.
And how many people chip into that effort?
Oh goodness, I think we've had more than 50,000 observations submitted to the Western Monarch Milkweed Mapper. So I'm not sure how many unique users, but there are a lot of people that participate. And then this is a slide of some of the, this is a slide of some of the priority action zones for Western monarch recovery. So these are just some of the strategies that we recommend for, and several other agencies who we work with, and private other entities as well who are involved in Western monarch conservation, all agree on the priority strategies for recovering the monarch population. And really, there's a strong focus on work in this early breeding zone. That's that light blue area that you just saw, in planting milkweed and native nectar plants in this area.
Yeah, and we can talk more later about how everyone in that area can potentially help with that effort. But in the meantime, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about this latest count, some of the numbers that we're seeing here.
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned our Western monarch Thanksgiving count a moment ago, and here these are just annual monarch abundance estimates since 1997 that have been collected by volunteers. And this is really just the census of the Western monarch population. So we've seen a drop from here, the late 90s, when the Western monarch Thanksgiving count started, when we had over 1 million monarchs overwintering on the California coast, to several hundred thousand for many years, until just 3 years ago, when we had about 30,000 monarchs for 2 years in a row. And last year we had only 2,000 migratory monarchs. And then of course, we've got some earlier estimates of the size of the population from the 1980s, which are at 4 to 10 million monarchs. So we've really seen a pretty dramatic drop in the migratory population of Western monarchs.
So to what do you attribute that drop as of now?
Sure. There are several factors contributing to the monarch decline, including habitat loss, pesticide use, climate change, and disease. So habitat loss includes both loss of milkweeds, those are the only plants that monarch caterpillars can eat, as well as the loss of other wildflowers whose nectar fuels monarch migration. Of particular concern in the West is the loss and degradation of the monarch's forested overwintering habitat, which is all along the California coast. So we know that more than 60 monarch overwintering sites have been destroyed, and another 51 are threatened. Also, pesticide use is contaminating milkweed throughout the monarch's breeding range. A recent study conducted by some of Xerces Society scientists, as well as researchers from University of Nevada, Reno, found 64 different pesticides in milkweeds that were collected from all different landscapes, from natural areas, people's backyards, from areas adjacent to farms, and even from plants purchased from nurseries that, in theory, people would be buying to help monarchs, including several compounds that are really toxic to monarchs.
And how can people maybe avoid buying plants like that if they're ones that they're buying from a nursery? Is that possible, easy?
That's a really good question. Some plants are labeled as like, I know in the nursery that I go to, some plants are labeled as neonicotinoid free, and those are some of the compounds that we're really concerned about because they can persist in the plant tissue for a really long time and remain toxic to insects that would feed on those plants. So you can look for plants that are neonicotinoid free. You can also ask as a consumer when you go to buy plants what they've been treated with, and the people at the nursery may not know, but I think if enough people ask, they'll start to realize that's really important. That's an important consideration for their customer base.
And of course, in addition to monarchs, you also do a lot of work with bumblebees. And I know in August, something pretty exciting happened regarding an effort you've been working on for a while with the Franklin's bumblebee, which hadn't been seen or has not been seen since 2006, but was only just added to the US endangered species list, thanks to an effort you started. I think is that 2010, is that right?
We submitted a petition to protect Franklin's bumblebee in 2010, working with Dr. Robin Thorpe, who dedicated decades of his life to studying that bumblebee. Pictured here is the rusty patched bumblebee, which occurs in the upper Midwest and the eastern US. But Franklin's bumblebee occurs in Northern California and Southern Oregon, and it just received Endangered Species Act protection this summer and is the first bumblebee in the Western US to be protected under the Endangered Species Act.
And then, of course, your work also extends to water creatures. I guess the question is here, I know, so you work with freshwater mussels in the West, and I know they need various protections as well. Some of those protections are already sort of happening on the East Coast, but not on the West. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that there's a really high diversity of freshwater mussels in the eastern US, and there are several species that have gone extinct and several that are listed as endangered species in especially the southeastern US and some in the other parts of the East as well. But in the Western US, until very recently, very little was known about the fewer species of mussels that we have out here. So for the last about decade and a half, the Xerces Society has been working to understand the distributions and conservation statuses of our Western fauna of freshwater mussels. And we have a pretty active freshwater mussel program here as well.
And yeah, so that was all for the slideshow, but I don't know if you wanted to sort of continue to talk about the mussels from here, and then we can go back to the monarchs and the bumblebees. But I saw that sort of a recent success for you at the Xerces Society on the mussel front was petitioning for protection for the Western ridged mussel. And the US Fish and Wildlife Service saying in July that it would start a status review of the species. So what does that mean? What is the status review and how does that process start and why?
That's a great question. Yeah, so that is part of the process that the Fish and Wildlife Service undertakes to determine if a species warrants protection under the Endangered Species Act. And the Western ridged mussel is a species that occurs in the Western US. It's been lost from much of its range in Southern and Central California, but still occurs in Northern California, as well as the Pacific Northwest. But is one of several species that's been affected by these enigmatic die-offs lately that we've been documenting the last several years and are somewhat unexplainable and really concerning. So just to take a step back, freshwater mussels are pretty extraordinary invertebrates, yet they're often overlooked. They live on the beds of rivers and streams, and they play a really important functional role in aquatic ecosystems, freshwater ecosystems, not unlike reef building corals and the role that corals play in oceans. So freshwater mussels provide structure and nutrients for other aquatic invertebrates, which then are food for salmon and other fish, and they also filter the water. They play an incredible role in purifying the water. So we've worked for a long time to understand where each of our Western mussel species occur. We've crowdsourced that information and built a database. We've worked with several partners and we've conducted direct surveys to just understand distributions. And then we've used that information to evaluate the extinction risk of different species. And from that process, now are focusing much of our conservation attention on the Western ridged mussel, which seems to be the most imperiled of our Western species.
So what will that attention look like now that you've successfully, petitioned the US Fish and Wildlife to at least start looking into them themselves?
We're also working in partnership with the US Fish and Wildlife Service. We're already brainstorming what recovery would look like, what sorts of strategies need to be employed. We're continuing to conduct field surveys to do inventories of all of the mussel species, but especially Western ridged mussel, to fully understand where they occur and what population sizes they have in each of these areas, so that we can identify and protect the sort of the strongholds of the Western ridged mussels populations.
Yeah, and I know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
We're also really trying to understand why these unexplained mussel die-offs are occurring. They're happening in multiple locations throughout the Pacific Northwest, and they're really scary and they're really sad to see. I mean, you go to a site, we use snorkel gear and dry suits to survey for mussels, and you go to a site and just see dead shells, and there's some that we've been tracking for several years, and the area where mussels are dying seems to be growing. So that's an important component of our conservation strategy.
And I know you said it was kind of mysterious as to why this is happening, but do you have any ideas?
We have some information to suggest that it may be a virus, but we don't know for sure, and we're still doing research and working with many partners to try to understand exactly what it is and how it's spread and how to stop it.
Oh, wow. And I know you've also been doing work with some indigenous tribes in the area, or at least one in particular, on conserving mussels.
Yes, one of our longtime partners on our mussel conservation work is the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. They have, and for many years, they have had a really active freshwater mussel conservation program as well. So we have worked in partnership with their freshwater mussel conservation program to on many of our projects. For example, I mentioned we had built a database of freshwater mussel occurrences and have crowdsourced just information on where the species occur. And we've done that in partnership with Confederated Tribes of Umatilla Indian Reservation, as well as several other conservation efforts of ours.
And for those tribes, what's the significance of freshwater mussels? How important is it for them?
Yeah, with the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, freshwater mussels are culturally important as a first food. And so it has been a priority for those tribes to invest in understanding and conserving mussels, which aligns really strongly with our mission at the Xerces Society to also protect these species.
And then I guess we can go back to monarchs. They're a crowd favorite. But from all sort of the crowdsourced activities that you do to sort of track both their food and the monarchs themselves, what have you been learning about how their sort of, how their overwintering sites have been affected in the Western US over the past couple of decades or so?
Yeah, there are a lot of issues at overwintering sites in the West and in California, really. The Western population overwinters on the California coast. And unfortunately, many of the overwintering sites aren't actually protected, or for those that do have protection, it's often a local ordinance and it only protects the site when the monarchs are there. And so there are a wide variety of issues facing overwintering sites, but frequently they're cut down, or the area directly adjacent to the site. Those trees are cut down and that affects the microclimate of the site. And so monarchs come back to the same sites every year. So each year there are multiple generations of monarchs. So it's, the great grandchildren of the ones that were there the winter before, but they come back to the same few sites and they won't necessarily just go anywhere. So, if that site is cut down, I think it's lost. It's not like they'll just go to another place. And the sites where monarchs overwinter tend to have a very specific microclimate. Mm-hmm. So we have seen, I think I mentioned earlier, we've seen like 60 sites that have been destroyed in California. So of the several hundred places where monarchs have been documented as overwintering, we've lost 60. We've identified another about 50 that are currently threatened. Either there's a planned development or some other threat. And there's a whole range of issues facing these overwintering sites, from aging trees, to drought, to utility companies cutting them because of fire danger, which is a really a huge concern right now, and not a lot can be done about that risk. But yeah, unfortunately, monarch overwintering sites currently really lack legal protection in a lot of cases.
Just kind of going back a little bit, I'm curious about how these different generations of monarchs sort of, I guess, possess an intergenerational memory, where they know to go back to the site that maybe they hadn't been to, but their ancestors had. Do you know much about how that works?
That's a pretty fascinating mystery. There has been some research that has looked into how monarchs migrate, and I hope I am remembering this correctly, but I believe they use some sort of magnetic sun compass, but how the exact same trees are inhabited every single year when it's different individuals, I think is still a great mystery, and one that nobody really knows.
I mean, that makes it sound even more crucial that we're not cutting down these specific trees. is it mostly human developments that are disrupting these habitats at this point? Does that account for the majority?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the areas where monarchs overwinter along the California coast these are places where people also love to live, and the real estate is really valuable there. So yes, many of the sites that have been lost due to development, both commercial and residential development. Mm-hmm.
And I see that Beth says we're getting a lot of questions. So I think maybe this is the time in the panel where we turned it over to some audience questions.
Oh boy, we have a lot of questions. We're getting questions via email, via chat, via the question button, including people that want to go back to the slideshow. I'm going to try and do that. We're going to try and fit as much of this in as we can in our short amount of time today. Okay, Sarah Jane asks, and I think that there are a lot of questions about like, hold on, I want to find myself on the map and see where I am in relationship to what's going on with the monarchs. So she said on your slide of priority action zones, she's in Southern California and live in a canyon that was a designated monarch site. Yet the map tells us that planting milkweed within 1 mile of the coast is not good. First of all, is that true, Sarina?
We recommend not planting milkweed within 1 mile of the coast, but if you are in that zone and you want to help monarchs, I think planting native nectar plants for monarchs can be a really important strategy.
So it's okay to plant milkweed. So she has milkweed growing, and it's been growing on a hill with numerous caterpillars who then disappear, apparently to form a cocoon. Does that make sense? So is the nearness to the coast a problem? And should we be planting milkweed? Like, can I help by planting a bunch of milkweed?
We recommend that in California, people plant native milkweed for monarchs with a few minor exceptions, which is if you're within 5 miles of the coast in sort of the central coast zone, that you don't plant milkweed, you just plant other native wildflowers. And then in Southern California, if you're within 1 mile of the coast, that you don't plant milkweed, you only plant native wildflowers. Otherwise, anywhere else, we recommend native milkweed for monarchs. And that's due to a concern that putting milkweed adjacent to overwintering sites could disrupt that migratory behavior. So it's a precautionary approach. There are still some things that are not known where we make conservation recommendations all of the time and do so with the species' best interest in mind and take the information we have, which is nearly always imperfect. But with what we know now, we recommend avoiding planting milkweed adjacent to overwintering sites, which is typically within 1 mile from the coast in that region.
There we go. Charlene, I hope that answers your question. To the point about native milkweed. So Paul asks, Eastern milkweed won't work?
It will probably, other species of milkweed will probably attract monarchs, but we recommend native milkweed, which is, I mean, there are several species of native milkweed which are commercially available and more that are coming to market soon. So we recommend the species of milkweed that monarchs here have adapted with, and there are some concerns with tropical milkweed, which is a non-native species that's really popular. You can find it in some big nurseries. You can buy tropical milkweed and it's beautiful, but it stays green throughout the winter in many places, unlike native milkweed, which dies back. And the concern there is that monarch caterpillars breeding on tropical milkweed build up disease, build up pathogens, and then they can then become sick themselves and infect the migratory population. So they breed throughout the winter instead of migrating to overwintering sites. And then when they interact with the wild migratory monarch, with the migratory monarchs, they can make them sick. So that's why we recommend against tropical milkweed, and we ask people to plant native species, which will generally die back in the winter.
Got it. Have you ever made an attempt to establish new overwintering sites?
We have not. We have done a lot of work to map overwintering sites, to understand their habitat. We work with volunteers and do research ourselves to characterize the habitat of overwintering sites, and we work on restoration of overwintering sites. So we have a current project where we're working with California State Parks and several other land managers to develop plans and implement them for restoring some of the really important overwintering sites for monarchs. But no, we have not tried to create an overwintering site from scratch in a new place. I don't have a lot of confidence that that would be a good use of resources, because they're really particular in where they go. And I don't think you can just create one from scratch.
You can't talk the butterflies into it. Guys.
It'd be great if you could. I mean, I think you can do that with their breeding habitat. So they use only milkweed, but you can put milkweed almost anywhere within this huge range and they'll find it. And
again, the reason you wouldn't want to do that on the coast is about disturbing those migration sites, not about the marine layer.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay, we had a clarification. Okay, there's a lot of the questions are about kind of, again, what can we do? We all want to be very helpful. Okay, so we got an email question that asks, is there a way, should we be convincing those of us who are lucky enough to own homes, convincing HOA board members to start a butterfly garden? In fact, my HOA has done such a thing.
Sure. That's a great idea.
Go for it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic idea.
Pam, go for it, Pam. Okay. We're going to move on to other animals. We're going to halt with the monarchs, and I'm going to go back. My last question is going to be that slide for the person who wanted to see the slide. Are other species of butterfly, namely the yellow tiger swallowtail, are they replacing monarchs or elbowing them out of the way?
That's a great question. I don't know specifically about the yellow tiger swallowtail. I know that monarchs have received a lot of attention, and that's really warranted. They certainly have undergone really dramatic declines, but there are a lot of other butterflies in the world and in the United States, and many of which are of conservation concern and are faring far worse than monarchs. So that's not answering your question at all, but there very well may be some species that are doing better in certain years and that may become more noticeable when there are fewer monarchs, like in California and other Western states.
Let's leap over to mussels. Do your mussel studies include the zebra mussel, and how do you get rid of one species without harming others? Want to get rid of the zebra mussel?
That's a great question. I mean, the zebra mussel is in the areas where the zebra mussel has invaded is highly problematic. And I think the best strategy is early detection for preventing the zebra mussel from taking over aquatic ecosystems where it has not yet done so. I know the zebra mussel can wipe out native mussels as well. So we don't work directly on the zebra mussel, other than that anytime we go into water, we're really careful about decontaminating our waders or wetsuits or dry suits, whatever equipment we're using, and follow all of the state protocols to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species.
Oh, you've got to decontaminate the wetsuit so that you don't spread zebra mussels?
Or anything else, or any other aquatic invasive species or a virus.
Sure. Interesting. Okay, so with this, we're running out of time, but I really want to go back to the slideshows because people have questions about those. And I think that we can end kind of with so many of these questions are about what can each of us do. And so let's kind of, end there. Bear with me. Okay, so this is the slide I think someone was asking for. And this is the crowdsourcing program that you have. It looks like you can text milkweed sightings, monarch sightings, and monarch breeding. What do? You email them? How can we help? If we see a monarch, what do you want us to do?
Yeah, you can sign up at this link at monarchmilkweedmapper.org, and it will walk you through it. You can take pictures on your phone of monarchs and upload them at your computer through this site. We also have an app through a iNaturalist project, and the link for that is on this website. So you can do it directly from your phone, but basically contribute, if you are in the Western US, contribute observations of monarch butterflies at any life stage or milkweed, or both. The breeding observations are like a monarch caterpillar on a milkweed to that map.
Oh, did someone want to see this map again as well? So this is, can you all see this chat thing? Is this in everyone's way? This is kind of for those of us who are in California. I'm in brown. So in Marin County, I am in dark brown here. So again, avoid planting milkweed within 5 miles of the coast. Can I ask a dumb question, Sarina?
Sure.
Do monarch butterflies only eat milkweed? Is it just milkweed or nothing?
Yeah, so as caterpillars, they only eat milkweed. That's correct.
Okay.
As adults, they can feed on a wide variety of wildflowers. So if you plant other nectar plants, so native wildflowers, and we do have lists of, depending on your region, here are some good wildflowers to plant for monarchs. That will help fuel the migration of the adults.
Got it. And then any other eastern species of butterfly? Oh, she meant the other slide, this one. Okay, great. And then finally, for stop share, for back to the bees, because I know that the Franklin's butterfly is also, it hasn't been spotted since 2006. And I had said to Sarina earlier, I wanted to be the one to spot it, but apparently you've really got to go on a big hike if you want to even be in the realm of the possibility. You mentioned that there are other species that we can participate in spotting, in addition to the monarch. Are those are on your website? What other crowdsourcing opportunities are there that we can participate in?
Yeah, so for bees right now, we have a program called Bumblebee Watch. And anywhere in the country where you are, you can submit observations of bumblebees that you photograph. So submit photos, and that information will be used and already has been used for bumblebee conservation by scientists and conservation organizations like the Xerces Society. In addition to Bumblebee Watch, we have several state Bumblebee Atlases in the works. So we currently have Bumblebee Atlases going in Oregon, in Idaho, and Washington, and we're launching an atlas early next year in California. And that's a little bit more intensive survey that volunteers sign up to do to inventory the bumblebees of the state and identify the flowers that they're using and other habitat features. And that all of that information is directly used to inform conservation of bumblebees that are in trouble. So, and in California, for example, Beth, there are several, beyond Franklin's bumblebee, there are several other species that don't seem to be faring that well and that need some conservation effort.
So we can help. And what I think is so exciting about this is, Jessica finds these trailblazers for Alta magazine that are people who are kind of themselves impacting California and the West in some really powerful way, as your Sarina is doing, are doing. But to kind of welcome the rest of us into participating, I think is really exciting. And I hope that this event has been recorded, and we're going to send you all a link, as well as links to as many as the kind of crowdsourcing opportunities that Sarina has mentioned. We will include as much of that as we can. So if you do want to participate, as I do, you'll be able to do that. And we are well past out of time. But I wanted to thank you so much, Sarina and Jessica, for your great work on this and taking the time today to speak with us. Before you leave, everyone, join us next week. We're going to discover the secret and hidden pockets of California and the West with Stanford professor and futurist Paul Sappho and Alta's publisher and editor, Will Hurst. So join us for that. We'll send you an invite to that. But as for today, thank you so much, Sarina and Jessica. This was really fun. And to everyone for attending today. We're really grateful. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.